Hi, everybody. So thanks for coming along today. I'm going to talk today about what makes video effective. There's a lot out there at the moment. There's behavioural science principles, there's neuroscience principles, and it's all a bit nuanced. So I think what we wanted to do today was really make it simple and give you 3 principles for making video effective. So moving on, I'm Carole. I work for Saba, and I work in Saba Studio, and we put together digital experiences for our clients. And a lot of what we're doing now is actually creating video. We do a lot of that now, and I think it's like top of the list, isn't it? The LPI, I think it's the #1 medium for delivering learning. So I also today would like to thank a colleague. I don't know if any of you have seen Charlotte speak before, but Charlotte Hills is one of our learning consultants, and she's also a neuroscientist. She would have been with me today, but she couldn't be. But she's studying her PhD at the moment, so she's very busy. So Charlotte's very kindly shared some of her slides with me, so hopefully I'll do those justice today and talk about some brain stuff. Charlotte will be happy to take any questions. So if any of you have those questions today, come and see me, and I'll either try and answer them or I'll filter them through to Shah. Okay, so the 3 principles that we actually honed in on were 1, using core emotions, 2, telling stories, and 3, tapping into social norms. And the thing here is that these are all scientifically backed. These are the things that make memories happen, and that's what we want to do, isn't it? We want to create memories. That's what learning's all about, essentially. So let's start with the first one. Let's get emotional. So I'm going to ask True to play a video. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it okay. So, bit of audience participation. How did that make you feel? Anyone want to share how that made you feel? What emotion did that stir up in you? You're all very shy. Yeah, excitement. Yeah, a bit of an adrenaline rush. So what we're trying to do essentially is tap into a core emotion and stir up the audience. Did you notice that heartbeat track? It was running through that, and it was getting faster and faster and faster. And we're actually trying to create that sort of sense of panic, anxiety. I need to pay attention to this. I might miss out on something. And that is the core emotion we were tapping into. That was fear or anxiety. So it's always good to think about what emotion are you going to try and tap into to try and trigger that encoding, that long-term memory. So a little bit on the brain then. What's happening is that when you get a bit stirred up, when you feel an emotion, your limbic system is fired up. And as a primitive being, we're thinking, oh God, we need to survive. So we better pay attention to that. We better store that one away. And that's what happens. It then gets moved into long-term memory. And just to sort of show you an example of this in practice, if we move on to the next slide, think about this question. Do you remember 9/11? Okay, everyone's nodding. Very few people are shaking their heads here. And the next question is, where were you? So yeah, you're nodding again. A lot of people remember the exact place that they were when they heard about 9/11. And this is essentially a flashbulb memory. So, you know, whilst where you were doesn't have any specific relationship to the events, your brain is now wired to grab every little mini event that's happening and store it away, because it might be important for survival. We need this, we need this, we need this, you know, let's gather it all together. And so we remember that stuff, and we remember it in the long term. So that's an interesting thing to think about. You know, we're not saying that you have to create flashbulb memories and use, you know, disturbing events to make memories happen, but it's making the point around using emotion in learning. And as I said before, you know, the EY one, it was created to improve the sort of digital fluency skills within their group. And we wanted to tap into some sort of motivation that would make people take notice. You know, how do you future-proof yourself? How do you future-proof your skills? Take notice. So, does anyone remember this film? Yeah, again, there's lots of people remember this. Maybe have watched this. Can you remember the names of the characters in this film? Yeah, yeah. Joy's coming out. Any others? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's reveal them and then put you out of misery. So it's joy, fear, anger, disgust, and sadness. Now, these are all core emotions, and the psychologists at Berkeley were consulted on this film, and they identified 5 core emotions that would be used in the film, the ones that actually have the most influence on us. So I think that's a good way of actually remembering and thinking about what emotions can we tap into. We've started having that conversation now. When we do a behaviour change piece, we actually say to each other, well, okay, what emotion do you think we need to tap into here? Yes, of course there are other emotions. Some of them might be sort of subsets of these emotions. I think there's a 6th one, surprise. But it's good to tap in to these emotions and think about how you can create those lasting memories. Okay. So what I want to do now is play another video. I'm going to rely on Trudy to interact a little bit with it, but you know, feel free to direct the interaction. So we're ready to play. Look, Trude, off you go. Into drag. No, drag across. From the bar, drag, that's it. Okay, off you go. Yeah, you have to look at that one then.
Morning, Tani, you alright?
Hi Jess, look, I know we agreed that you could work from home today, but you're going to have to help me on this proposal. It's got to be done by the end of today, and at this rate I'm not going to make it. Can you come in please?
Yeah, sure, that's okay. I'll be there as soon as I can.
Fab, thanks. See you the next hour.
Okay, I was just... Oh, God, there's those roadworks. This is going to be really tight.
Anyone? Oh. I think you got going, didn't you?
Jess? Where have you been? We've had to ask Clifford to step in. Wow.
Stop it there. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. You were right first time, weren't you? So I was watching the reactions. I mean, some of you, didn't show much of a reaction. Some of you were laughing, because I saw some smiles and that over there. Now, I think, we're tapping into emotions again. Some of this subject matter, yes, it might be a little bit obvious, but you just want to be reinforcing behaviours. So we're using a bit of humour, because sometimes humour can just sort of make it feel like just a little bit less patronising. So humour is an emotion, it's linked to joy, we feel good, it's a good feeling. There's some nice little scenes in here, there's some other quite funny scenes too. And this is what's happening here. So we've also started to look at the power of story. So let's move on to the next point. Okay, so when you're using emotion, you need to be seeking out emotive stories. Emotion, I've said this before, it helps to embed stuff, it helps to transfer stuff into long-term memory. Secondly, you don't be afraid of negative emotion. I think sometimes we are a bit afraid of using negative emotion. We don't want hard-hitting stories, we don't want stories that make things look bad, make us look bad, but actually fear and sadness are probably the most two powerful emotions for triggering those memories. And then the third point is about keeping it real. If it's not real, then it doesn't have the impact. You might think about exaggerating to try and get some sort of emotional impact, but that's probably not going to work that well. So if it's not authentic, and the stories aren't real, and they're not from real people, then it won't land. If you remember all those, those early learning courses with massive great newspaper headlines, talking about impending doom, we forget them straight away because they get overused. So they don't have the same sort of impact. Okay, so stories then. This is principle number 2. We're tapping in now to stories. So we've created a number of stories for one of our clients, Sodexo, and what we wanted to do was represent real stories, not script them ourselves, but hear from real people. So we knew what behaviours that we wanted to address, but what we thought about was how do we represent people who are doing these roles that we are addressing in our target audience. So we actually got feedback from clients around great examples of how they'd received really good care. And these were caretakers, they were cleaners, people working for Sodexo in a healthcare setting. So we took those stories, we read them, and I have to say some of them were extremely emotional. Some of them actually made us cry. Some of them were very amusing. And then we wanted to represent those. Now, it's quite a difficult one to do because we want to preserve the reality, the integrity. So we worked with a documentary filmmaker to portray these stories. Now, I'm going to show you one of the videos. It's a short video. It's quite emotional, but it does have a bit of an impact. There's no audio either. They needed to use these in different countries, and they didn't want it to be language specific. So I'll get Trudy to play that video now. So we're starting to pull together the three principles now. We've looked at motions, we've looked at stories, and we're also now starting to look at that third principle around tapping into social norms. And with the Sodexo examples that you saw, we were using real stories. People are predisposed to actually think about aligning with people like them or people who they want to be. So I think that social norms is the third principle here. So has anyone seen this campaign or some of these adverts? They're fantastic, aren't they? So, Nike are actually tapping into real people, and they're inspiring us with stories from real people. It's no different to the treatment, if you like, that we used on Sodexo. Let's hear from real people. We know that if we see sort of CEO-style videos, apologies to any CEOs if they are around, but they're not always going to engage people. People feel a bit disconnected from senior sponsors. You need to show that authenticity. So what's happening in the brain? So we're human. So, our Neocortex helps us to engage in complex social interactions. So that's the area of the brain that's being wired when we hear stories. And those emotions in those stories, you take social stories, emotional stories, they're really going to, be effective when it comes to delivering learning. So when you create social learning, you might be thinking about creating some yourself, you might be watching it. But when you engage with social platforms, you're probably thinking about two things. For those of you who use social media a lot, you're thinking about how does this make me look? And the second thing you're probably thinking about is what are other people doing? And that's the two things that you're probably thinking about all the time. And that's really what draws people in. That is the success of bringing social learning into the mix. So back to the point around hearing from people like us, it's about finding your influencers. Who are people gravitating towards when it comes to hearing the best way to do things? And if you're going to use those influencers, don't get them to just present the perfect world. Get them to tell personal stories, get them to talk about their pain points, their journeys, and then you get the most effective learning as a result. And then if you're going to be, this is an interesting one for me. I've been watching sort of social learning and platforms for years to see whether the adoption will actually start to spike. And I think we're starting to see it now, definitely. And I think Burson has quoted recently that big companies are probably 3 times more likely now than 2 years ago to really invest in social platforms for learning. So it's good because we're not really worried about it. I don't know, in this audience, how comfortable you feel doing a selfie video. I've done a few. I've had to do them within my organisation to engage people. And you feel a bit self-conscious, but we're used to it now, and it's easy to do now. So I would say that tap into platforms where people are already interacting. It's a great thing to do. And if not, if you're trying to create a space, again, it goes back to that principle around finding your influencers, because your influencers are most likely to draw people in. So get them to start seeding the platform with content and then drawing people in and inspiring them. So, we use like a chat area. It's a great place to actually start getting discussion going, and then suddenly someone will put a video up, and then suddenly somebody arranges a virtual conference. It feels like it's in the flow, and it works really, really well. So it's effective for learning. There's no doubt about that. So 3 practical tips then. When you're tapping into social norms, find your influencers. Peers are really powerful when it comes to social norms. Get their stories, and real stories, of course. We're interested in real stories. And then finally, keep it real. Absolutely keep it real. Don't go overboard on bringing the sensationalism into those videos. And again, those 3 tips. If you're thinking about using social learning or social video, then these 3 tips apply. Find your influencers, get them contributing, get people to tell stories, and get people to ensure that they are keeping it real. And I think social groups will probably encourage each other to do that anyway. So that's me done for today. I'm happy to take questions if you have any. Come over and chat if you want to. Trudy, we're on stand 12, so if you want to come over, I'll be over there for a bit. So thank you for coming today.